everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities Podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. Today is Monday, May 19th, and we've got an outstanding lineup today. We have Irina Slav from Bulgaria, and she is just having a glorious day. In fact, she's got my favorite t-shirt on. It says, "Sanctions don't work as intended." How are you today, Irina?
I'm great, thank you. It's springtime, everything is good for now.
We need to have that shirt put out on as merch for people to buy, because that is a quote I use almost daily, because sanctions don't work as intended.
Yeah.
All right. We also have Tammy Nemeth. She is the head cabano over there at the Nemeth Report on the great Substack. How are you today over in the UK, I believe?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Stu. Yeah, it's spring here, really dry. And compared to last year where everything was wet all the time, this is quite a shock. So we'll see what happens in the next little while.
I'll tell you, I gotta love a country that is cloud seeding and then putting out solar panels. Which one happens? I don't know. Are you going to block the sun, according to Bill Gates, or are you going to put out more solar panels? You got to
Good question. Good question.
And then we have the David Blackman. I mean, not just a David Blackman. We have the David Blackman, the head of the Energy Absurdities Realities over there with Substack at blackman.substack.com. How are you today, almighty David?
I am just lovely. Just happy to be in Texas. It's such a beautiful day.
Oh, you got to love that. I'll tell you what, this is an interesting question and topic today, because I think the world is changing. And I think there was one of the authors over at oilprice.com had a wonderful story out there. And I can't remember which author it was, but she said, is the bromance on between the United States oil companies and the Middle Eastern oil companies? We have EQT doing a lot of work now over there, and it's not part of the deal trip that President Trump took last week. And so we now have to wonder, is OPEC Plus now going to have the United States as a member? And we're going to throw this out to the team here as a question. Tammy, what are your thoughts of the Trump tour last week?
I thought it was really fascinating to see this kind of shift in the geopolitics, at least be confirmed. People have been talking about how Trump has sort of reconfigured what America's role is in the world, or what he would like America's role to be in the world. And this was just a real clear confirmation of what those changes are. So basically, no more interventionism, telling countries what to do and follow a certain democratic principles or whatever. One of the comments he made is that not everything is about democracy, and it's, I'm not quite, there's a lot to unpack with that statement, and there's been a lot of criticisms about what it means to be a democratic state. Is it just about voting? Are there other things that need to be involved with it? And is it appropriate for Western countries, particularly the United States or Europe, to go around and tell other countries what to do, how to have their economies, who they ought to trade with, all this different kinds of stuff? And so he's basically saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And which is was the Chinese approach, especially with the Belt and Road Initiative, where the Chinese would come in and say, we'll help build your infrastructure. We really don't care what you're doing in your country. We're just going to help you build stuff. And so there was a hint there that this is going to be sort of America's approach in the future. Now, as a non-American, I'm really curious to hear what Dave and Stu have to say from their perspective as Americans. And I'm super curious to hear what Irina thinks about these changes that seem to be quite significant, not just for energy, but for how the globe is developing into these different trading blocks.
Irina, what do you think?
Should I go first? Well, first of all, thank you, Tammy, for laying it out so succinctly and very, very nicely. I think this could be a seismic shift in American foreign policy, and it's a very welcome shift from my perspective, because, as you said, for decades, especially the last 30 years, US foreign policy and Western European foreign policy has been about intervening and telling countries what to do and how to do it. Amazingly, the how and what has always been, perhaps coincidentally, done so it can benefit Western European interests and US interests rather than the interests of the countries concerned. And this has led to a sort of a backlash, especially since 2022, with the whole Russia-Ukraine affair and all the sanctions and the talk about de-dollarization. I think that we have a rare instance of the US doing, under Trump, what the Chinese have been doing, namely learning from other countries' mistakes. And this is really good news, because in Europe, we have no sign of those at the top learning from their own mistakes, let alone someone else's. And I think what Trump is doing is a positive thing for the world. He's being more rational. About that statement on democracy, what is democracy? If we look at Europe right now, at the European Union, do we actually have a democracy? No, we don't. In the US under Biden, do you guys had actual democracy?
Nope.
It wasn't just Biden. So I think something important might be happening. I mean, Trump even had some words of criticism towards the Netanyahu government, which is shocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, you bring up some fantastic points, Irina. In fact, the change on this trip to Syria is probably one of the biggest that's out there, and I applaud President Trump for lifting the sanctions based off of the leadership change. We don't need the US government doing covert operations in countries to change regimes. We need to have a real business meeting and have trade partners, as opposed to having the CIA and the USAID corrupt things going around the business. That's just my personal opinion. But David, what do you think?
Well, it's going to be a hard habit for the United States to break. The CIA has been fomenting and executing coups d'etats in other countries since the early 1950s, and has probably done it in a dozen or more different countries, and probably had an influence in the Romanian election, which was just completed. So, it's going to take a lot of willpower and hard-headed governance by the Republicans, Trump and his appointees, to break that habit by the CIA. The trip last week was, it was a new American doctrine in terms of relations with the Middle East. Our media here is so vacant and clueless. They completely missed the point because they were too busy reporting about the Qatari jet gift to the Pentagon and trying to spin that against Trump.
Yeah.
So they've largely missed the point, but this was the announcement of a completely sea change in American policy towards countries in the Middle East and its ways of engaging with these countries. The most crucial passage in the president's speech in Riyadh was the passage in which he completely condemned the neoconservative policies of the past, the nation building that we tried to engage in under George W. Bush and the Dick Cheneys and the Donald Rumsfelds of the world. And those people are dead. They're gone from the from the Republican Party now. There's zero, they have zero influence on Republican Party policy. And as long as the Republican Party is in control of the national government here, we're not going to go back to that. It all revolves around energy too. It all interrelates with the Trump energy policy, just in terms of the president and his people understand that there's not going to be a big drilling boom here in the United States, and that all of our shale plays have peaked, but they still want to have more oil produced globally, to get oil prices lower down to the $50 range. That's their target. And I think everyone's aware of that at this point. And so a lot of this has to do with trying to use American technology and skill sets and investments to spur additional drilling in the Middle East, in the UAE and Qatar, or Qatar, and the Saudi Arabia, and the other big oil producing countries in the Middle East region. It's the same thing with Trump's approach to Iran. Trump doesn't want to have a war with Iran. He wants to negotiate a peace there that will enable Iran to continue to put crude oil onto the global market to help control oil prices. And so the general philosophy boils down to America is going to build our infrastructure, develop our technology, export it overseas, and encourage drilling in these other countries so that you still get the same result. More oil on the market, lower oil prices, cost savings in energy to the American people to spur economic growth and get us to the 3% of economic growth that our Treasury Secretary believes is kind of the magic bullet number that'll result in enough revenue flowing into the federal government to start drawing down on the federal debt. I mean, it's all very complex, and it all revolves around energy. And I think it gives us some cause, and I think all of y'all have said it. We have a reason to be optimistic now about America's relationships with these countries. I'm sure they were all out. I think one of the reasons why we saw all the pageantry and the red carpet rollout and the incredible reception the president got in these countries, because they're as sick of Biden and his people as we all are, and having to deal with these deep state hacks that have been focused on interfering in their national affairs instead of having a productive relationship with these countries that are economic powerhouses in their own right. I mean, it's something we as Americans have, I think, largely failed to see in this region, in these countries in this region, is that, yes, there's all these conflicts revolving around religion that happen there, but these countries are economic powerhouses, and it would be a really smart thing for our country to have a positive commercial and economic relationship with those countries. And I think, hopefully he'll be successful in bringing that about, but he's going to have to fight against all these deep state hacks, the Atlantic Council, and all these internationalist organizations like the World Economic Forum, and even the United Nations will be opposed to allowing this to come to fruition, because the constant conflict in the Middle East benefits all of those organizations and their real goals of having a global government at the end of the day. And so I'm optimistic. I'm proud, frankly, that the president and his people chose to take this approach last week, and I wish them all the success in the world.
Can I add something there? That was a really great description of that position. But I'm wondering about the natural gas pipelines that they want to run through Syria. And Qatar and Saudi Arabia have been real big backers of the one pipeline, which was Qatar's originally, and then it was supposed to go through Syria, Jordan, and then through Turkey and into the European Union as a sort of counter to Russian natural gas.
Right.
And then Iran had its own pipeline that it wanted to run through Syria and Turkey and into the EU. And so what do you all think about what Trump said there making peace with Syria, stopping the sanctions or whatever, do you think it's about the pipeline?
Yes.
Certainly.
And
Yeah, but
why
what-
did the
what is Trump's interest in getting, Qatari gas to Europe when he can get American gas to Europe? Which,
price
you know,
difference? Russian natural gas is ballpark $6. Ballpark LNG price to EU is ballpark $15.
I know, but he wants to export more American gas to Europe, not more Qatari gas, even if there are American companies involved in.
Why did the CIA take down Syria? I mean, now that was an amazing thing President Trump just did, is lifting the sanctions to help the country out because of a leader that had a questionable past, even his words. But he was sincere, looking forward to a new thing. So, you know, it's about, and Tammy, your point is brilliant. It's about the pipelines.
But to Irina's point, which I think is a very strong point, I think American LNG companies, exporters, excuse me, are confident that there's plenty of market to go around for their product in Asia, Africa, and other countries around the world that need the natural gas. And so they're happy to export it to Europe. But we should remember that almost all those cargoes before Putin invaded Ukraine were going to Asia. And, they're more than happy to export their product to Asia and Africa and other parts of the world that need the gas if these pipelines can feed the European market.
But can they really? And is the current Syrian government reliable enough? Because when you said he has a questionable past, that is, like, as I said, really putting it mildly. Yeah. These sorts of people are not, known for their reliability and their loyalty to foreign partners or anyone except their ideology. So,
right.
Wouldn't that be a risky move? But that's it's a moot point. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, but remember how he put it. He said he's giving them a chance to show they can be trusted.
That's yeah.
Right. And so he is giving them that chance. So it's an olive branch. I doubt he really expects them to follow through in a way that is in good faith. And I suspect, a year from now, we'll be sitting and seeing that was probably an olive branch that failed. So
it's better to give an olive branch. It's better to give an olive branch and worry and work towards peace. Let me go ahead and play this 1 minute video from Steve Wyckoff on the Tucker Carlson show. And I think that
thank you, Christian.
Thank you, Christian. And I really, Tammy, you brought up some great point, and David and Irina, I think we're seeing a trading block change off of this trip. And we're going to see Russia, India, Pakistan. I think they're going to end that little skirmish there. Asia, South Korea, Japan, all this trading block is coming in. And Steve Wyckoff hit something that I'm over here going, yeah, he heard it from me. No, I'm just kidding. But here's it's my ego getting in the way here. I go, hey, I've been saying that. Here we go. This is off the Tucker.
Undervalued opportunities if we get peace and stability throughout the region. If we solve Iran and you can finance in that market, the Israelis are brilliant from a technological standpoint. They've got a huge technological base there.
Yes.
They're in AI, robotics, blockchain. That's where the UAE is today.
I know.
That's where Saudi Arabia is today. That's where Qatar is today. Can you imagine all these countries working collaboratively together and creating that type of market? It could be much bigger than Europe. Europe is dysfunctional today. Imagine if they became functional and everybody's a business guy there. One more thing, as a condition in that region, you have young leadership. You have young leadership in MBS. You have relatively young leadership in the UAE. you have relatively young leadership, new leadership in Qatar. People who don't have the old sensibilities, people who want to do business, who
Definitely.
realizes, like Trump's way is people vote their pocketbook, right? So he wants to bring the bacon home to the United States. I think everybody's bought into that over in the GCC.
I agree. I mean, we're reverting to like human nature. People want stability and prosperity for sure.
Correct.
Anyway,
It's one thing to want it, it's another thing to get it right and maintain it. That's the hard part.
Yeah.
I think if we get rid of
there's the complexity in the middle. Sorry, go ahead, Stu.
If we get rid of the UN and the CIA, the world will be a safer place. Just a personal opinion. Sorry, Tammy, I did not mean to cut you.
I would say that the Middle East has a lot of complexity with the religious component. And, you know, you can focus on the business case or whatever, but in Iran, the business case was what the Shah was pushing and was rejected by the religious people who decided, or at least were expressing their view that that was corrupting the Iranian people. And so they have to be really careful, because one of the reasons why there was this proliferation of mosques around the world was that the Saudis were being accused by the religious leaders of being corrupted from all the oil wealth, and that they weren't following the religious precepts that they were supposed to as the leaders of the people. And one of the ways that they were able to sort of gain somewhat approval from the religious leaders was to spread these mosques around all over the world. So the religious component is really significant, and I don't think it should be sort of said, well, it's just another thing to consider with the business models, because with
huge.
Iran and Israel, yeah, Israel's got great tech and they're really advanced in biomedicine and everything, but the Iranian religious leaders will not deal with Israel.
Well,
so,
Israel won't deal with Iran either.
Exactly. It works both ways,
Yeah.
right? And so when you have these religious differences, you can have the best business case in the world, and they're still going to matter.
Yeah, I found that part of Witkoff's comments pretty naive, but I'm sure he knows they're naive, right? He's delivering a public message that the administration wants delivered.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means he actually believes Israel and Iran are going to have a strong economic relationship anytime in the near future.
No, but Tammy or I can't remember if it was Tammy or Irina brought up a great point, and that is President Trump stood up to Netanyahu, and that is the first time that a American president stood up against Israel, as he should, because Netanyahu was not invited on some of these trips, nor is Netanyahu invited in on the ending of the Ukraine Russian war talks, because he wants something else out of this. And President Trump is standing up for United States first, which is as he should, unlike the rest of our Congress that has been bought off by Israel.
Yeah, but it ties in with what Witkoff said. He was clearly describing an ideal case scenario, which is not going to happen in the next 2 generations, at least, I believe. But who knows, in 100 years, I think that the main message about making this region more peaceful, it could start taking care of the radical religious factions, because radicalization is not a product of, good life for the most part. It's a product of, serious living crisis, to put it this way. But maybe if they can't get them to all work together, clearly, but they can get them to stop fighting all the time. Gradually.
I think that's the short-term goal for sure. Yeah. Long-term, you're right. I mean, I think there is a long-term process potentially, but you got to start somewhere, and this is where they have to start. And but I think that what they are optimistic they can do in the near term is build these commercial, economic, energy relationships with those 3 countries he visited, I think the administration views that as a near-term success story, likely success story that they'll be able to look at the end of this term and point to as a big success. The rest of it is aspirational, the opening to Syria, the opening to Iran, the negotiations with Iran and trying to avoid a war there. Obviously, you want to try to avoid that. Trump wasn't elected to go to war with anyone. His base is very anti-interventionist based. So, I think they all understand that you have to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon one way or another. They just hope it can be the peaceful way rather than the military way. Hi, Kitty. That's a beautiful cat.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to move, Moxie.
She's
Those are great points, David, because one of the things that Trump emphasized in his speech there was that, yes, we're not going to intervene and tell countries what to do. But if you threaten America, if there's any legitimate sort of concern, we will come down with a hammer. And then he was going on about how great the military is and all that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of the concern was that if you're showing your hand that all you want to be the peacemaker, that you don't want wars, then that's a really good way for bad actors to take advantage of you. Because when you come for a deal, they're like, oh, okay, well, you don't want to cause a war or you don't want to be in a war. And so then that can affect how the negotiations go or what actions other nations take. So I thought that was interesting or appropriate for him to be emphasizing that I don't want to go to war, but if you press me, the hammer will come down.
Yeah, President Poopy Pants saying does not work in scaring people. No.
It's a red line. So the other thing that I think is significant with respect to him wanting this development and pushing the natural gas probably and more energy production from the Middle East, and I love Stu's title for today is the U.S. part of OPEC Plus now? Maybe because I'm thinking the IEA just produced a report, I think on Thursday or Friday last week, where they were talking about the energy requirements for AI and data centers and how at least 50% of it will have to be LNG. It'll have to come from natural gas. Yeah. And the other 50% apparently is going to come from renewables. Mark Mills had a really great, yeah, exactly. Mark Mills had a really great assessment of it on Real Clear. I think it was on Friday or Saturday. And I highly recommend people taking a look at that. But so the IEA now, it was like full booster for energy transition and everything. And now it's like the reality is setting in. Oh, AI and data centers are going to need energy, and it's going to have to be reliable. It's going to have to be, reasonably priced and so on. So maybe part of this is also what these new energy requirements are, and they're going to need more supply, even as the EU says they're going to be net zero and all that. Maybe nuclear can fill a portion of it, but that's longer term. In the short to medium term, they're going to need power like yesterday. And where are you going to get it from? It's certainly not going to be from wind, solar batteries. It's going to have to be natural gas. But then, which I'm sure Irene will talk about, I think it was one of your stories about there's just not enough turbines. So.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. But yeah. Go ahead, Stu.
The United States is the United States is 3 grid systems is very. Did I just lock up?
No, we can.
Good.
I think I just locked up.
Oh, he can't.
Okay.
The
United States has three grid systems, and ERCOT is good for a couple of years. But in the data center world, if you do not have natural gas plans, you can look at a map and see where the pipelines are. You can also see where you want to build an AI data center in the United States. And it is not in Hawaii, California, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, or a couple other states. And oh, by the way, those are all democratically run green energy policy. And
What a
then if you do
coincidence.
not have a turbine, to Irina's point, if you don't have a turbine bought in the United States, now you're 5 years away from getting it. Oops.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a problem.
Oh,
Yep,
so
it's a big one.
I was looking at my notes here and I jotted down when David was talking about talking about developing out the businesses in the Middle East and in Saudi Arabia and so on, and what this means for investment for developing more oil and gas resources. It was like last year or the year before where the head of Saudi Aramco and some of the other big Middle East producing companies were saying, we really need more investment here. We need more investment in new drilling to develop out the field some more and everything else. And they were really berating the various institutional investors and whatnot for not putting enough money in order to sustain the amount of production, even at current levels, let alone what's going to be required in the future. So I would just support what David was saying, that this is really another pitch for encouraging investment, more investment in oil and gas development in the Middle East, as well as America and other more stable regions.
Drill, baby.
And
When fiscally
investing
responsible.
in it.
Yeah.
We're $4 trillion short if demand curves remain solid. That's assuming that supply and demand is a pricing mechanism that's still used. But if supply and demand were a formula that was even followed in oil pricing anymore, we need $4 trillion just to meet normal decline curves.
Yeah.
We don't have that investment going on.
No.
So that means oil prices are going to go up. When is depending on how much investment versus how much supply and demand and manipulation of the market goes on. So is that about time for stories?
Yep.
Yes.
Let's go to Tammy.
Okay, so in Canada last week, Mark Carney announced his new cabinet, and Stephen Guilbeault, the former Greenpeace activist who used to be the Minister for Environment, he's been moved to a new portfolio. So now he's the Minister of Canadian Identity. I guess we have to have a minister for that, and heritage and culture, whatever. But then they asked him about other stuff, and he said, and this is the title of the National Post article: Stephen Guilbeault throws cold water on new pipeline, says we have enough already. And when he was interviewed, he said, look, they built Trans Mountain and it's only running at 40% capacity, which was a lie. And so here they've got all this capacity, and the IEA says demand is going to peak next year, or in 2029. So we really don't need any more, and stop talking about pipelines. And what bothers me is that politicians are allowed to put out disinformation and misinformation like that while they want to go after regular people for pointing things out. Yeah. Because a simple Google search from the Trans Mountain reports can tell you that they operate at 77% capacity, that where they're short is in their short market, because they have a short-term capacity that they put in there for emergency shipments or whatever, and it's underserved because they charge twice as much as the other pipeline. So until they get their prices under control, no one's going to want to use it. So that's the stupidity in Canada. The cabinet is pretty much the same as the old one, with even more radicals in place. Tom Mumford says, don't they think where the pipelines go matter? No, they don't. They don't care. Canada had all these different proposals. A lot of them, I think it was either Enbridge or TC Energy had spent $1 billion just to try to do the approvals process, only to have the minister say in the end, yeah, no, we're not going to approve it. So after spending $1 billion in the process, they were told no go. So then they're wondering why companies aren't putting proposals in. Why would you? Why would you when there's no guarantee? You're going to throw all this money in there for planning and stakeholder engagement and indigenous consultation and whatnot, and then in the end, it's up to cabinet to decide whether or not it gets approved. It's stupid. So then the other story is the Britain, where they just passed a bill to create Britain's Orsted GB Energy. And they're spinning it to be this investment sort of utility that will fund a lot of this wind, solar, battery stuff. They're putting 8.3 billion of taxpayer money into a startup funding for GB Energy. But I think Catherine Porter or maybe some others had crunched some numbers and show it's actually way more than 8.3 billion that will be under GB Energy's purview to spend as they see fit. And of course, it's run by a bunch of activists. We know who knows what's going to happen with this money. It'll be very interesting in the next little while. But what I find so amazing is that Britain apparently has a black hole in its finances. Can't have farmers doing stuff, or they have to go after taxing the inheritance of farmers. But somehow they found 8.3 billion to put into GB Energy.
Of course.
But there's a black hole.
So this is the most amazing story of the week to me, because what they're saying is they want to create Ørsted is a company that's involved in all these big offshore wind developments. And every month or so, their CEO has statements in the newspaper demanding more subsidies from some government or another, United States, Britain, wherever they're operating. They always want more subsidies, which tells you what? It tells you this is a business model that cannot exist without a constant injection of additional subsidies from governments. So the goal here apparently in Britain is to create a government entity modeled on Ørsted, which means the government company is going to be constantly demanding more subsidies from what? Itself?
From itself.
I mean, it's
stunning.
From the taxpayers.
There is
you
zero
will own it
self-awareness.
and pay for it.
Yeah.
Just unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's what the Labour government said they were going to do it, and given that they're Fabian socialists.
You know, a byproduct, Tammy, of your Canada story is I loved the story on Britain's Ørsted. Holy smokes, Batman! What great fun the UK gave my readers this weekend. But the Canadian government doesn't realize that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is taking Canadian oil shales to the Asia market. Who's the loser in this formula? The United States, because we held Canada captive at lower prices because they didn't have a way to export their oil to the open market. Right. So if you want to stick it to the United States, Canada, build a dang pipeline and ship your product out to the Asia market, and then really show that Trumpster how to do business. Good grief, folks.
You're right.
Wow. I'll tell you, Robert is on an absolute terror this morning. Holy smokes, wind is thermal power as far it is to a windstorm. Good morning, Robert, and I love your sense of humor.
I love this comment from Khaled. Thanks, Arena. Happy to join this discussion to find out that all participants are well understood what is going on in the Middle East. Finally, it is a matter of justice and equal respect, and I really appreciate that comment, Khaled. Because that was a point I was trying to make and didn't do it as well as I would have liked to earlier. So thank you for making that point.
Well, David, we only hire the handicapped here.
Yeah. I'm
Sorry.
verbally handicapped today. Yes.
That was a great point. And then this one as well.
The next blood-sucking parasitic leech is discovered. It should be named Orsted. Oh, I love that. Man, I wish I would have thought of that line.
That's a good
And then
one.
we have
I may
Jeff
steal it.
is the business model. I love
Exactly.
it.
That is,
Yes, that's
yes,
bang
that
on,
is the
Jeff.
business model. Yes.
Okay, sorry. And Tammy, you have a great Substack.
Yeah, it's the nemethReport.substack.com. Come check it out. I've got something coming out this week about the Council on Foreign Relations' new Energy Realism Institute. So
Oh.
suddenly now the transition people are calling it energy realism. They've stolen from us. I guess
Oh my.
we should be happy, maybe.
Yeah, I
don't
guess
know.
so.
Stealing is flattery, I think, is a new trade.
That's what it is. Flattery.
Oh, so here's my two. Doug Sheridan on the right. This second story is just glorious. He wrote it on his LinkedIn page. I want to give him a shout out on that. It's a Texas size circuit on the ERCOT grid. People will remember 2 years ago, the legislature created this it was initially a $5 billion subsidy fund for the building of new gas plants in Texas for additional baseload that we desperately need. And, you know, the response to it was so overwhelming that they increased it to $10 billion. And now the latest news is that over half the proposed projects that had been awarded a placement in that program have now been canceled. And so we still may not get the natural gas power generation that we need. And I would tell you people at the IEA that you're a big piece of the problem with your stupid, ridiculous, everybody knows or have no validity forecasts for peak oil and peak natural gas demand. You're the problem here because these companies go to lenders and say, I need X billion dollars to build this gas plant. And the lenders say, well, we just read the latest IEA report. It says we're going to have peak oil in 5 years. And so everybody knows that's BS except the people running the damn banks. You've got to stop this propaganda, okay? Because you're killing investment in the right things in our energy sector here. Okay, that's my rant. But thank you to Doug Sheridan for writing that story. Yes.
You bring up a fantastic point on the Texas ERCOT grid, and I could share my screen, but I'm afraid of my bandwidth. Texas is the only state in the country that has a balanced map of production of natural gas plants planned, in construction, and ready to go. You look at the map, and there's all of a sudden it's like, holy smokes, Batman. Right. California, New Jersey, Hawaii, all these states don't have a plan. That's what I added to Doug Sheridan's articles.
But the point of Doug's piece is that some of those planned plants aren't going to get built.
Yeah.
And so we've got to get back to that plan. And that means the banks have to lend the money to build the plants. Second, House Republicans look to end some of Biden's madness. This bill is the big, beautiful reconciliation bill that was passed out of the House Budget Committee last night on a party line vote because, of course, no Democrats want to vote for any kind of sane legislation. And a big part of that is because the House Republicans are targeting some of the wind and solar subsidies that were passed in the IRA. And the Wall Street Journal today, one of my formerly favorite energy writers in the mainstream media, Jennifer Hiller, has a piece at the Wall Street Journal that's just the biggest piece of boosterism propaganda I've ever read in my life. And I'm sorry, Jennifer, I love you, but damn, that's not a good story. Anyway, but the Republicans are looking to end some of these subsidies, not all of them, but some of the most blatantly counterproductive, and also not just related to renewable energy, but to the $7,500 electric vehicle credit too. So that's all part of the spending bill. They'll be phased in. The elimination will be phased in over 4 years as it currently sits. So that's what that story was about. Anyway,
And it's despicable, David, that they're looking to. Why can't they understand, the rhinos in the political world understand that they're about to be primaried out? This is not a either or. This is
Yeah.
if you're a rhino, get ready. You are going to be thrown out.
oh, I'll say one last thing. One last thing about that last story is that the 45V credit for hydrogen is also among those to be eliminated. The politics of that are going to be tough because it's, ExxonMobil wants that credit to stay in place. Not just green hydrogen people, but blue hydrogen people want that credit to continue to exist. So the politics of that one are going to be really tough.
Wow. And you have energy absurdities at blackman.substack.com.
That's it. Blackman.substack. Come see me, folks.
All right. We have Miss Irina.
So we've been talking about gas-fired power plants. So despite surging power demand, gas-fired power faces manufacturing constraints that could limit near-term growth. Basically, they can't produce the turbines fast enough.
Right.
And Woodmark says here that this year, the utilization rate of manufacturers of gas turbines is around 90%, which is a lot, which means potentially delays in new gas-fired generation capacity. And again, nobody thought about this because everybody thought that wind and solar will do the job, which they won't because they can't. It's yet another lesson that we're all learning the hard way. Yeah, and they try to insinuate that gas demand won't grow so strongly as it could because of wind and solar. I'm quoting, in Europe, decarbonization goals are pushing unabated gas to the margins by 2040. Are you serious? Unabated gas? Really?
Unabated gas. Good grief.
Unabated gas, yeah. We can't build them fast enough, but yeah, talk about unabated gas. And the other story is on something that Tammy has talked about a lot. Can Britain's neighbors help it keep the lights on? No. The short answer, no. The long answer is hell no. And the story relates a recent occurrence from January when the UK experienced a lull in wind. So it was not producing enough, and it had already closed its coal power plants. So there was no base load to step in. So they had to raise imports from Denmark at more than twice the price per megawatt hour, more than twice the market price. But Denmark had to get this electricity from Germany. It exported less to Germany so it could increase exports to the UK. And after relating this story, the FT authors are telling us that the increase in interconnectedness in electricity should increase resilience. No, it shouldn't. It couldn't.
Wow.
When it comes to energy, the best way is to produce it at home, but not from wind turbines. It's I'm getting a headache as I speak about it.
I'm old enough to remember when the Financial Times was respectable.
Oh yeah, once upon a time.
Reuters, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, increasingly long time ago. But imagine this: what if Denmark had a lull in wind speeds as well? What if its biomass plants had not enough biomass because it was really cold and it had to satisfy domestic demand? What then? If the UK relied on Denmark, what happens then?
Why doesn't the UK can just ship more biomass from the US? There's no cost to it. There's no use of fuel in a dry goods tanker going all the way across the pond.
My understanding, though, is that the UK is also quite reliant on Norway for electricity. And this has been one of the big things coming up in this year's election in Norway, because they have a Labour government in charge there, and they were going to build more interconnections with the UK. And the people were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Every time they're short, our prices go up. We invest all this money in our infrastructure. We were guaranteed a low price. And now suddenly every time they run short, we pay more. And so the people are all upset. And it's an issue in I think the election in Norway is in September. And so interestingly, the finance minister of Norway is the former head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg.
Yeah.
He's a finance minister now?
He's the finance minister.
Oh, poor Norwegians.
Oh,
Yeah.
my.
So now they've put on hold this interconnect with the UK. And meanwhile, the UK is like, oh, we're just going to build more wind. And then we'll have these interconnectors to smooth things out. But the people with the interconnectors or who are providing that smoothing out energy are like, well, you're kind of making it expensive for everybody. So, yeah, interesting times.
The old dad joke, when you run up and pull the finger and somebody passes wind, that's going to be the new handshake in the EU. Sorry, that's the only way they're going to get extra wind.
That'd make a
That was
great
funny.
Monty Python skit, wouldn't it?
That was awful. I am so sorry. I just ruined the whole podcast with that bad dad joke. All right, here we go. Here's Irina. And Irina, I love your Substack.
Thank you. It's Irina's Love on Energy. And I don't know what I'm writing about next, but I will be writing something tomorrow. I try to write every day or almost every day. There's a lot to cover.
Yes.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
And I highly recommend everybody reach out and subscribe. I'll tell you, you can't buy this. That was not Ed. He is not photogenic. And I love this article. I actually took that article and then did a Groke search on some of the facts and everything else in the UK electrical generation mix. And renewables account for 41% of the fossil fuels is 27, nuclear is 14. And then I went through and started analyzing out some of the other stuff on there. And this is an amazing story that is coming out from Catherine Porter, our guest that was just on. She is from Watt Logic. And this article in what publication?
The Telegraph, wasn't it?
Yes. And she has some phenomenal information coming out. We have to give her a shout out. There are hidden costs. She analyzed the 10 levies that are actually added to the bills paid by household and businesses. That is no longer a conspiracy theory that renewable energy is cheap and affordable. She has hit it out of the park. And I invited her on my podcast, and we need to have her back here because that story is absolutely rock solid. And I've absolutely gone through the charts and her numbers, and it just makes my head ache and my heart ache for the people in retirement on pensions trying to make their bills, and they just keep running down the stupid road. It is just absolutely amazing. And the Republicans have one last chance to kill the Green New Scam. I'll tell you, in the United States, if Yoda were sitting here and he would go, corruption deep it is. I mean, it is absolutely disgusting that we can't stop. That was actually a pretty good imitation.
Yeah, that was really good, actually.
We can't stop corruption. And it is disgusting to me that we have rhinos that just can't go, stop the dang thing now. Oh, we're going to phase it out gradually. No, you're not.
Huge mistake.
Right.
It's a huge mistake. And then the green energy transition is actually kind of funny because the green energy, there is no transition.
There is no transition.
It is absolutely hysterical. when you sit back and go through the entertainment value of the UK leadership. And that goes back to our earlier. I mean, you can't buy that kind of a face. When you look at that face I mean, that's not a meme.
And he looks like a Wallace and Gromit character. That's
He
the
does. I love Wallace from it.
yeah. That's what they mock him. He looks like one of the
kind of does,
claymation
yeah.
guys. Kellen had a
Domenico
really
Robert,
great
you
comment
are.
there.
Yeah, I love
I'll-
that. Do what?
Yes. Is it possible in the near future to see a competitor to Baker Hughes? I think it's actually GE Vernova in manufacturing gas-fired turbines for LNG plants. Oh, wait, for LNG plants. The number of orders around the world is huge. All are relying on only one company.
Yep. Great point.
Well, but for LNG
Baker
plants,
Hughes does
Siemens.
gas
I thought
turbines,
Siemens.
I think he's talking about the turbines and the other things.
well, GE Vernova makes the turbines for combined cycle natural gas plants, power plants.
So
Right.
does Siemens.
And Siemens does too, but yeah, GE Vernova takes most of the orders in the United States. I'm not sure.
The Chinese must be making some.
Well, I would assume China makes its own, I would think, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. Don't know the answer to that. But it's a great question. We
It
don't
is
have
a
enough
fabulous
manufacturers.
question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Intelligent guest we have.
Maybe we need a subsidy for that.
I think so.
Yeah.
See, that to me is not a subsidy. That's an investment. And
That
you
would be
don't
an
need to do
investment,
you could do an investment in that because you would be getting your money back.
Right.
Mm.
You'd be investing in something real that has an actual return on investment.
Oh, no way. Are
Go
you
figure.
serious?
Wasn't
Wow.
idea.
Well, we've got 3 minutes. Let's
Actually,
go
I
through-
have to run,
Tammy
guys.
has to leave.
I'm sorry. Thanks
Bye,
so much
Tammy.
for all the comments,
Bye.
everybody. Thank
You
you.
did
Bye-bye.
great. See ya.
Bye. See you next week.
Bye.
Irina, what are your thoughts for this upcoming next week, and what do you think about today's show?
For what's upcoming next week?
Whatever you think is coming. around.
Oh, I really don't know.
I think Tammy operates the same way I do. Yeah.
Right now I live day to day, Stu, because there's so much news coming in every day. A lot of it surprising, most of it not really. But I try to take it like a recovering addict, one day at a time to cope with it all.
I have never seen this kind of a news cycle. I am working 24/7, it seems like. And I'd like to give a shout out to all the people trying to hack my site. I'm still getting 100,000 people a day to this site and about 7,000 denial to 10,000 denial of service attacks a day. And my server is absolutely getting hammered. And I'd like to give all of you knotheads a shout out for trying to hack my stuff. Go away. Anyway, David, what are your last thoughts?
I'm sorry, Irina. I called you Tammy a minute ago. I operate on the same
That's
basis
okay.
as Irina. Every day is a new day for me. And so I get up in the morning, survey the headlines, and decide what to write about then. So I don't know what's coming up the rest of the week for me, but I'll figure it out.
I'm sure someone will surprise us yet
Yes.
again.
All right.
Oh, wait, I
with
do
that-
know one thing that's coming up. I'm going to be interviewing the great sage David Ramsden Wood this Wednesday morning. We'll be live streaming it at 9 o'clock Central Time, 8 o'clock Mountain Time, where David is. Be there, be square.
I love DRW. I've interviewed him maybe 6-7 times, and he is one cool cat.
He's
Yep.
really cool, yeah.
All right. Well, have fun. We'll see you guys later.
Have a great week.
Bye.